rules implemented last September that insert abortion even into states with abortion bans. Thursday's move directly cuts the money to pay for such abortions. The move to block funding for military leave and travel to abortion and gender surgeries is another matter. Senator Tommy Tuberville seems to be gaining support for blocking Senate committee approval of military appointments. He says the issue now goes far beyond abortion. Tuberville says while Congress alone implements such policies, the Defense Department ignored that constitutional provision. This is Life News Radio.
The View, the accurate view of the human person, changes everything. The news you hear and see pertaining to the human person has the power to inform or misinform your opinions and what you do with the gift of life and what you allow your government to do. It's why we at this station offer news on the life issue. We hope you carefully assess what you hear, read, and view.
It may begin with a simple denial of human dignity, especially for the disabled, yet assisted suicide presents opportunity for coercion, patient abuse, and cost savings for medical insurances. Or when counseling is seen as too expensive or difficult, arranged suicide may be seen as a shortcut for depressed persons. 10 states are promoting arranged suicide. 2 states welcome non-residents. Others offer easy prescriptions and shrinking waiting periods for reflection. Southern Baptists are joining others in calling for a Christian response to these problems of human suffering. For pro-life headlines delivered to your email address daily, sign up at lifenews.com. This has been Life News Radio.
This is Jesuit Father Robert McTagg, your daily host of the Catholic Current, and I'm asking for your help. Folks have been asking me to answer questions on the air, so I'm asking you to send questions to my mailbag. We can do this good work together. Send us your questions at thestationofthecross.com/askfather. That's thestationofthecross.com/askfather. I look forward to hearing from you.
Think about this. Less than 4 in 10 Americans can name any of the 5 freedoms guaranteed in the First Amendment. Yet, 41% of Americans under 35 think the First Amendment goes too far. Do you know your 5 freedoms guaranteed in the First Amendment? Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom to peaceably assemble, freedom to petition the government. Think first. Go to thinkfirstamendment.org to learn more.
Joe McLean here, host of A Catholic Take, heard on the Station of the Cross each weekday morning at 7 a.m. Eastern. A bold synthesis of information and inspiration, keeping you up to date on the news and issues that you may have missed from a courageous Catholic perspective. That's A Catholic Take, weekday morning, 7 a.m. right here on the Station of the Cross and the free iCatholic Radio mobile app. Download it today. God love you.
As part of our efforts to teach the beauty of our faith, we're broadcasting a special educational lesson every Wednesday called Lessons in Latin. I'm Canon Bourgeois, a priest of the Institute of Christ the King, Sovereign Priest. These mini teachings break down the history of the various parts of the Holy Mass. You can hear Lessons in Latin on Wednesdays at approximately 5:15 a.m., 3:45 p.m., and 9:40 p.m. Eastern Time. That's Lessons in Latin, Wednesdays at 5:15 a.m., 3:45 p.m., and 9:40 p.m. on the Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network.
Each weekday from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern, the Station of the Cross brings you Mother Miriam Live.
What do we mean by the end of man? By the end of man, we mean the purpose for which he was created, namely to know, love, and serve God.
Tune in from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern for Mother Miriam Live on the Station of the Cross and our free iCatholic Radio mobile app. You can also watch the video stream every day on Facebook or on YouTube.
This is Joe McLean, and you're listening to the Station of the Cross, proclaiming the fullness of the truth with clarity and charity.
Heard around the world on your Android and Apple mobile devices.
Go into the world and tell every man that you meet, there is a man on the cross.
A Catholic Take
What you need to know right now. A bold synthesis of inspiration and information. Keeping you up to date on the news and issues from a courageous Catholic perspective.
A Catholic Take with Joe McClain starts now.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. It's great to be on with you. You have survived the weekend. Congratulations. It's time to get back at it. Just imagine what you get to accomplish this week. Praise be to God. But here's a big question for you. Should Catholics go to see the movie Oppenheimer? Should Catholics go to see the movie Barbie? Should you take your kids to see Barbie or Oppenheimer? God, you is. We're going to have that conversation. I saw a post from my friend Gabriel Castillo from Gabby After Hours. A fantastic, I think one of the greatest Catholic evangelists of our day and time. His YouTube channel, Gabby After Hours, is literally amazing to me. And I saw a post from him on Facebook that really caught my attention and put that question in our mind. Should we as Catholics be supporting movies like this? We're going to talk about that at 15 past the hour. I'll share with you Gabe's perspective and Eric Salmon's perspective and let you form your own. And maybe we can get you to comment on that. Maybe we'll put up a poll on YouTube and see what you say. All of that coming up at 15 past the hour. At 30 past the hour, we're going to have on Dr. Dan Schneider from TAN. He's got a book out, the Liber Christo method. You know, how many people do we know that we're like, man, that guy's got to be possessed? I mean, good grief. That lady, oh my heaven, she is definitely possessed. Well, we're going to talk about those possessions, those diabolical oppressions, the method in which we can combat the devil, the diabolic harassments, possessions, and all that and more in the Liber Christo method with Dr. Dan Schneider at 30 past the hour. So lots to cover today on the program. We're going to share the links to everything we discuss in the show notes over at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. That's thestationofthecross.com/ACT. By the way, if you've not signed the petition for personhood right now, would you do us a favor? Join us. Go to thestationofthecross.com. Find that Life Site News petition that we are co-sponsoring. We're trying to gather 1 million signatures. Would you sign that and share that with a friend? We'd be grateful. Thestationofthecross.com. Let's pray. Let's begin. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thine intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and now your saint of the day.
Saint Ignatius of Loyola, pray for us. Ignatius was born into a Spanish noble family, the youngest of 12 children, in 1491. As a boy, he served as a page in the court of Ferdinand and Isabella. He received a military education and grew into a worldly young man with a penchant for fancy dress, dueling, and the company of women, though he also demonstrated a knack for diplomacy and maintained several gentlemanly virtues. Ignatius became a skilled and dutiful soldier, but in 1521, in a battle against the French, his leg was broken by a cannonball, ending his military career, and he underwent an extremely painful treatment and recovery that still left him with a pronounced limp. As Ignatius recuperated in his father's castle in Loyola, he was brought spiritual writings like the Life of Christ and the Golden Legend, instead of the chivalric tales he requested, and he found himself more inspired with imitation of the great saints than with dreams of martial glory. He was overcome with remorse for his past sins, and he consecrated himself to Jesus and Mary, graced afterwards with a brief vision of Our Lady that confirmed him in his zeal. He took a vow of chastity, left his sword in the chapel of a Benedictine monastery, and cast away all his worldly possessions to become a pilgrim to Rome and the Holy Land. Eventually he returned and studied theology, and discerned not only his vocation, but a call to found a new priestly order. Ignatius and a few companions, including St. Francis Xavier, founded the Society of Jesus in 1534. Pope Paul III approved them 6 years later, and Ignatius was elected the first superior general. The word Jesuit originally referred to those who appropriated the holy name or used it too often, and Ignatius never used the word himself, but over time the society proudly adopted the word with which they used to be mocked. Ignatius died in Rome on July 31st, 1556. He is venerated by the Jesuits as their founder, by all who practice Ignatian spirituality based on his famed spiritual exercises, and as a patron of soldiers and of Catholic retreats. St. Ignatius Loyola, pray for us.
And now your headline news. Fox News reports Rand Paul announces official criminal referrals as email shows Fauci COVID testimony absolutely a lie. Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky has announced an official criminal referral to the Department of Justice with regard to Dr. Anthony Fauci. Paul pointed to an email from February 2020 in which Fauci detailed a call with British medical researcher Jeremy Farrar, who was director of the Wellcome Trust at the time. According to Fauci, in the email, those on the task force call expressed concern about the origins of COVID. Quote, there were mutations in the virus that would be most unusual to have evolved naturally in the bats, and that there was a suspicion that this mutation was intentionally inserted. Going on to say, the suspicion was heightened by the fact that scientists in Wuhan University are known to have been working on gain-of-function experiments to determine the molecular mechanisms associated with bad viruses adapting to human infection, and the outbreak originated in Wuhan, close quote, Fauci wrote in that email. Senator Paul stated, quote, this directly contradicts everything he said in committee hearing to me, denying absolutely that they funded any gain of function, and it's absolutely a lie. That's why I sent an official criminal referral to the DOJ, close quote. The New York Post reports the DOJ tries to jail key Hunter Biden witness Devon Archer on eve of congressional testimony. The Department of Justice is pushing for Devon Archer to report to prison just days ahead of the former Hunter Biden business partner's hotly anticipated congressional testimony, according to new court documents. Manhattan federal prosecutors on Saturday filed a letter requesting a judge set a date for Archer, 58 years old, to start his one-year sentence in a fraud case unrelated to the first son's various scandals. Archer, who is set to deliver closed-door testimony to the House Oversight Committee today about Biden, had been challenging the conviction. Archer's attorney, Matthew Schwartz, said Sunday his client would still testify on Capitol Hill as planned, despite allegations the DOJ letter was an intimidation tactic. Breitbart reports Ukrainian drone attacks on Moscow force airport to shut down. Russian authorities say 3 Ukrainian drones attacked Moscow in the early hours on Sunday, injuring 1 person and prompting a temporary closure for traffic of 1 of 4 airports at the Russian capital. The Russian Defense Ministry referred to the incident as an attempted terrorist attack by the Kiev regime and said 3 drones targeted the city. 1 was shot down in the surrounding Moscow region by air defense systems, and 2 others were jammed. Those 2 crashed into Moscow City Business District in the capital. There was no immediate comment from Ukrainian officials who rarely, if ever, take responsibility for attacks on Russian soil. And those are your headline news. The gospel today comes to us from Matthew chapter 13, verses 31 through 35. Jesus proposed a parable to the crowds. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that a person took and sowed in a field. It is the smallest of all the seeds. Yet when full grown, it is the largest of plants. It becomes a large bush. The birds of the sky come and dwell in its branches. He spoke to them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed with 3 measures of wheat flour until the whole batch was leavened. All these things Jesus spoke to the crowds in parables. He spoke to them only in parables, to fulfill what had been said through the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables. I will announce what has lain hidden from the foundation of the world. The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Haydock's Catholic Bible Commentary today said, the gospel of Christ compared in this verse to the grain of mustard seed has indeed little show of grandeur and human greatness. St. Paul calls it a scandal to the Jew and a stumbling block to the Gentile. But Jesus Christ here assures us that when it has been spread and promulgated by his ambassadors, vis-a-vis the apostles, it shall surpass every other mode of instruction, both in fame and extent, according to St. Ambrose, St. Jerome, St. Augustine, and others. Haydock goes on to say, by the woman here mentioned, St. Jerome understands the church gathered from all nations, or the power and wisdom of God, according to St. Augustine. So Haydock points out, as do the other commentators, that the size difference, something very small to something very big, really is the metaphor here. That is true of the measures of flour, which is there's a lot of flour here and very little yeast. And yet that very little thing affects the whole and the big. The Ignatius Catholic Study Bible today said that the parable of the mustard seed illustrates the contrast in size between the seed and the mustard, or the mature shrub rather, reaching nearly 10 feet in height. Jesus likewise sows the kingdom in a small band of disciples, expecting it to grow into a worldwide church. Similar metaphors used in the Old Testament represent great empires as great trees, including the kingdom of Israel. In these instances, birds represent Gentile nations. Jesus' parable thus points to the spread of the gospel and acceptance of Gentiles into the church. More could be said, but I think one thing we can meditate upon today is how we might be that tiny little seed today. Who knows? Maybe great things will happen when you say yes to God. Let's say yes to God today and give our lives to him. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. I want to talk about Oppenheimer. Barbie is coming up next.
Please join us in a prayer to our guardian angel. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. O holy guardian angel, take care of our soul and body. Enlighten our mind that we may know the Lord better and love him with all our heart. Help us in our prayers so that we may not give in to distractions. Assist us with your advice so that we may see the good and carry it out with generosity. Defend us from the insidious snares of the enemy and sustain us in temptations that we may always be victorious. Remedy our coldness in our worship of the Lord. Cease not to protect us until you have brought us into paradise, where we will praise our good God together for all eternity. Amen.
Keep up to date with the shows we bring you each day on the Station of the Cross by viewing our programming grid on our website, thestationofthecross.com, and on our iCatholic Radio app. Just click the menu icon in the top left portion of our app and select the link to our programming grid. That's at thestationofthecross.com and on our free iCatholic Radio app for Android and Apple mobile devices.
Hi, I'm Debbie Georgiani.
And I'm Adam Bly.
Join us for the Spirit World on the Station of the Cross.
Don't be laying hands on people, and definitely don't be giving commands in the name of Jesus, leave so-and-so.
So what can we say if we feel like there is demonic activity? What can we do?
The sacramental graces of baptism, confession, and the Mass remove the vast majority of demonic problems outside of possession.
The Spirit World, every Saturday at 11 a.m., right here on the Station of the Cross.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. So good to be on with you. Coming up at 30 past the hour, we're going to have a conversation with Dr. Dan Schneider. He is the author of a brand new manual, really. It's a book, but it's a manual of sorts, the Liber Christo method. It's published by TAN, and he worked with Father Ripperger and others to develop a protocol of how best to deal with cases of diabolical oppression, depression, of harassment, of even, of course, full-on possession. And I think it's very, very fascinating. I especially like the reference to the devil as the lawyer from hell. It's very good stuff. That's coming up at 30 past the hour. Do join us if you can. But there are lots of stories in the news, of course, that are of great concern to me, and I'm sure they are to you as well. And I just saw, maybe it was like over the weekend or something, I saw this post from my friend Gabriel Castillo Great guy. I think one of the greatest Catholic evangelists of our day and our time. I really do believe that highly of Gabriel Castillo. He said this, my thoughts on Oppenheimer. Have you guys seen the Oppenheimer? I'd love to know. We put a poll up, a straw poll over on the YouTube feed, which you can find linked up at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. If you scroll down, you'll see the live video feed there. Underneath, you'll see icons. One of them is the YouTube one. Click on that. That's thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Love to know if you guys have seen Oppenheimer or not, or plan to. But Gabriel says, my thoughts on Oppenheimer. I am not watching it. If I know a movie has graphic nudity and sex scenes, call me what you want, but to me, it's like soft, hard porn in the middle of a movie. No thanks. Watching porn scenes in a large theater with a bunch of people, extra, no thanks. I don't need that in my memory. Before going to any movie, I recommend looking up parental ratings on IMDb or Common Sense Media. There's others. In fact, I'm going to share some with you here in a moment. But it's very fascinating because over the weekend, my wife and I had a wonderful opportunity to get away for, a night out for mom and dad, which was wonderful. One of the things that we did was we watched Bakita, the story of Bakita, which we saw. We watched it off of formed.org. We are subscribers. We love that service. And it was a good movie, very long movie, made in Italian with English subtitles, but we didn't mind. It was great storytelling of an incredibly difficult topic. A lady who had been abducted, put into slavery, beaten, abused, even sexually assaulted on numerous occasions. And yet she lived her life for the glory of God. She forgave as much as she loved. And she is an incredible saint of our time. And when you watch that, how they depicted her life, how they told that story in contrast to modern Hollywood movie, I think you find it can be somewhat startling to see, hey, we interrupt this plot to bring you sex. We interrupt this plot to bring you cursing or violence or whatever it is. It seems very, very distracting and seems to not leverage good storytelling in the process. And I think that's what Gabriel's trying to get at. But I found an article over at Crisis Magazine. Eric Sammons wrote this, the editor-in-chief over there, and I think it also illustrates this point. Again, if you guys have seen it, I would love to know your thoughts. We're going to be talking about some of this in the after show today, which we would love for you to be a part of. Again, thestationofthecross.com/ACT. But here is this article over at Crisis Magazine, Eric Sammons writing on his thought. The headline says, a movie isn't worth sinning over. A movie isn't worth sinning over. This past weekend, I saw the release of two major movies, Barbie and Oppenheimer. The juxtaposition of these two very different movies launched a debate on social media. Are you Barbie or are you Oppenheimer? Catholics should be neither. The Barbie movie is unsurprisingly woke, anti-man trash. The unrelenting message of the movie is that men are always dumb and or evil, and women are always smart, independent, and right. Since its creation, the Barbie franchise has managed to combine both misogyny and feminism into one plastic package. I have 6 daughters, and it would be a dereliction of fatherly duty if I ever encouraged them to play with Barbies. It's a no-brainer that Catholics should not support Barbie. By the way, let me pause there for a second and say Dr. Carrie Gress is going to be on Wednesday's show to talk about her review of Barbie, which I think we can keep in mind that Snow White is fast approaching. And I think there was a mermaid film not too long ago. So we'll have those conversations with Carrie Gress coming up on Wednesday. But Eric Sammons goes on to say in this article, but Oppenheimer is unacceptable for different reasons. In fact, I'd argue it's actually sinful to watch. I'm a huge fan of Christopher Nolan, the director of this historical piece on the development of the atomic bomb. When the movie was first announced, I planned to see it. However, I found out this weekend that the movie contains sexual scenes that contain nudity. Another no-brainer. No Catholics should watch Oppenheimer. This takes it surprisingly controversial among Catholics. This take is surprisingly controversial among Catholics. Over the years, I've been surprised to see how often Catholics, even ones who promote orthodoxy, including Orthodox morality, will encourage people to see movies with nude sex scenes. This is baffling because it's always a sin to watch such a scene. Always. Full stop. When you take this absolutist stand, you get serious pushback among Catholics. It's expected from liberal Catholics who are always seeking to diminish sin and its impact, but it's surprising coming from more conservative Catholics. They will argue that nudity has been represented in great art in the past, or that one can watch such scenes without getting aroused, or that the movie is much, much more than just one scene. All of these are excuses. There's a great difference between seeing Michelangelo's David and watching two naked people engage in intimate relations. To make this clear, imagine asking a decently formed Catholic of Michelangelo's time, quote, "Do you think it's a sin to watch two people fornicate with each other?" Close quote. The person would likely think you are the devil himself for just asking the question. But we've become so desensitized to this particular sin that we diminish, even deny, its intrinsically evil nature. The Catechism of the Catholic Church states, quote, "Pornography consists in removing real or simulated sexual acts from the intimacy of the partners in order to display them deliberately to third parties. It offends against chastity because it perverts the conjugal act, the intimate giving of spouses to each other. It does grave injury to the dignity of its participants, actors, vendors, the public, since each one becomes an object of base pleasure and illicit profits for the others. It immerses all who are involved in the illusion of a fantasy world. It is a grave offense. Civil authorities should prevent the production and distribution of pornographic materials." Paragraph number 2354, close quote. Eric goes on to say, "Note that there are no exceptions for, quote, 'it's artfully done,' close quote, or, quote, 'it's in an otherwise great movie,' close quote. Also note that nude sex scenes in any movie would be classified as pornography as the Catechism defines it. Likewise, one does not need to be aroused watching such a scene for it to still be sinful. Even if not aroused at the time, putting those images in one's mind can lead to later temptations. Further, if I killed someone but took no pleasure in the act, I still sinned. The morality of an act does not depend upon my emotional response to it. Even a eunuch should not watch other people engage in sexual relations. It should be remembered that the actors themselves are dehumanized when they engage in and we watch these scenes. As the Catechism states, it does grave injury to the dignity of its participants, actors, vendors, the public. To watch such acts is to sin against its participants, even if it does not lead one into temptation." Can I just pause there and just say for a second, as somebody who grew up addicted to pornography, thinking that was normal and natural, it's not normal and it ain't natural. It's a perversion of goodness. It's a perversion of sacredness. It's a perversion of that divine intimacy between a man and a woman. The very, very first attack against man and woman was when they were the most intimate. Look at the last verse of chapter 2 of the book of Genesis and the very first verse of chapter 3 of Genesis, and it becomes evidently clear that Satan attacks man and woman in the divine intimacy of that sexual relation. The one flesh bond. That is when the attack happens. That is when the perversion happens. And it's been happening ever since. And as someone who had grown up addicted to porn, you have the memories that you have crammed into your brain that rattle around. And it doesn't take much to trigger them. You could be sitting in a traditional Latin mass, hearing the most profound, eloquent, Thomistic, homily you've ever heard in your entire life. And then all of a sudden, Father will say just one little thing that leads to another thing, that leads to another thing in your mind. And there, in that moment, you might be fighting for your soul because of all of that memory that comes flooding back. That is the reality. And how many men today are addicted to porn? More than you think, more than you know. How many women today are addicted to porn? 30% and rising. Our country, our world is pornified. Should we be fanning that flame? Should we, as drunks, go into a bar and sit down and hang out with others? Is that smart? Does that make sense? If we are incapable of standing on our own 2 feet, we ought to take great caution in what we engage in. And I think that's at the heart of what we're talking about here. In addition to just the attack on chastity, on purity, on goodness in society, we have allowed ourselves to be entertained by such horrible things depicted in film. Eric goes on to say, and to say the movies in much more than that movies are much more than just one scene reveals the real reason many Catholics try to defend watching movies like Oppenheimer. They are so scared of being too outside the culture that they willingly sacrifice their integrity rather than be seen as uncool or weird. Sometimes they will even defend their choice by saying we must be knowledgeable of the culture in order to evangelize it. Nonsense. There is literally no movie ever created that a Catholic must see. And one can still engage with non-Catholics without knowing the latest pop culture references. In fact, by avoiding these evil influences, one is better able to evangelize. Catholics do not sell your morality for a Hollywood-spoiled bowl of sin. Treat a movie that has even a single nude sex scene as you would a drink with even a single drop of poison in it. Avoid it. If a movie has a sexual scene with nudity, no matter how brief and no matter how good the movie otherwise might be, don't see it. It's not worth your soul. It's not worth your soul. Which is why I would recommend something like pluggedin.com for movie reviews. Look at this. Kids' content is heavy. Teens, heavy. Adults, heavy. They break it down. They break down the positive elements, the negative elements, sexual elements, spiritual elements, and so much more. And there is a lot of graphic issues in this movie that I think Catholics ought to be very, very concerned about. How do you feel about it? I'd love to know. We have a straw poll up over at our YouTube video feed, which you can find linked up at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. That's thestationofthecross.com/ACT. We'll talk more about that in the after show. More breaking news is coming up next. Also, the Liber Christo method. It's all coming your way. Don't go anywhere.
Atheists claim theists are essentially no different than atheists because we reject gods too, such as Greek and Roman gods. But this is plain absurdity. What's our reason? First, it's an abuse of language. A theist believes in at least one God. An atheist doesn't believe in any God. They're mutually exclusive terms. To say a theist is an atheist to most gods is like saying a married man is a bachelor to most women. Second, it's bad reasoning. To say I'm an atheist because I reject some gods is like saying I'm an anarchist, one who rejects all forms of government because I reject communism and fascism, some forms of government. But that's silly. So the claim that atheists and theists are no different doesn't hold water. I'm Carlo Broussard with the ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
The Station of the Cross began broadcasting in Buffalo, New York in 1999. Since then, our listening areas have multiplied and expanded into several states. While our mission is to grow the Catholic faith through radio and other media outlets, our apostolate is supportive of, but independent from your local diocese. Through your generosity, we are able to inspire countless listeners with the gospel and help lead them to a parish to be spiritually nourished by the sacraments.
Hear what listeners are saying about the free iCatholic Radio mobile app.
Through the iCatholic Radio app, I have listened to the sermons and teachings several times. The effect has been a deeper understanding of my faith and Catholic tradition. This app has truly been a blessing in my life and has increased my faith.
Listen live or at your convenience to your favorite shows. Just search for iCatholic Radio in your app store today.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain, and here are your headline news. The People's Voice reports Facebook admit they censored anybody the Biden administration told them to, didn't even ask questions. A leaked email from 2021 written by the company's president of global affairs, Nick Clegg, to colleagues, quote, "We're under pressure from the Biden administration and others to do more," adding, "We shouldn't have done it," close quote. Hot Air reports Saudi Arabia to host Ukraine Peace Summit. Officials from the kingdom told reporters that they will soon be hosting a peace summit on behalf of Ukraine with representatives from a diverse group of nations in attendance. Given the Saudis' alliance with Russia and Iran, such a plan might have a chance of influencing the Kremlin and moving the war closer to an end. Ukraine is ready to take part in the summit, as are multiple countries from Africa and South America. But the prospects for success likely won't seem quite as bright when you notice that one country will be noticeably absent from the event. Russia is not going to participate. Catholic Vote reports New York City leaders say the city is at a breaking point. New York City is at a breaking point after more than 90,000 illegal aliens have arrived in the city since last spring, according to the city leadership. A group of 54 New York City Democrats sent a letter to Biden last week asking him for help. Democrats in the past have touted New York as a sanctuary city and decried border states like Texas for opposing open borders. New York City is being forced to reduce services to its people due to the migrant influx, the letter states. And those are your headline news. Hey, can I just say thank you to everybody who has left us a review, really. It's a team effort here. On the A Catholic Take podcast, especially over on Apple iTunes. I'm so grateful to you for leaving a review, being on the team. It really does mean a lot to us. It's in more than one way. It affirms us and what we're trying to accomplish on the show, so thank you for doing that. But it also is a way to help reach a new audience. You see, everything is algorithm-based anymore on the social media platforms. So when you signal to those algorithms that you are interested and engaged, well, they say, well, maybe this will be interesting to other people, and they begin to share it widely. 5-star reviews are one of the more powerful ways in which you can help a podcast grow. So even though we're a radio show, on our podcast side, we still want to spread the news as far and as wide as possible. So would you please consider leaving us a 5-star review today on the Apple iTunes Store? It would mean the world to us. You can find everything linked up over on our website, thestationofthecross.com/ACT. That's thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Thank you in advance for doing that. I got a copy of the book, The Liber Christo Method, from Tan Publishing. We're going to be linking to this book, by the way. Great book. I haven't read the whole thing, but I have been poking through major sections of it and spending some time with it. And I got to tell you, I loved it on a number of levels. Dr. Dan Schneider joins us now to discuss this. Dr. Schneider, good morning to you. Thanks for your time.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you? Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you for your service to our country, by the way. I served in the Marine Corps, and I wrote a book back in 2014 of how the technique that I use to overcome pornography addiction. I grew up on pornography addiction. That addiction led to mortal sins like abortion and, premarital sex, obviously, and contraception and a bunch of other things. And I could say I was probably harassed by demons and devils as a result of the sins that I committed, opening wide the door to them all. And in my book in 2014, I used my military experience as a metaphor for explaining the technique, and you have done the same thing. And I connected almost immediately to your book because of that.
I got the chesty puller. I don't know if you got the I threw that in for my Marine friends. Chesty pullers quote. Yeah. We're surrounded. That simplifies the problem.
Sure does.
There's a lot of parallels, as you know. There's a lot of There's a lot of parallels between the spiritual battle. Combat is combat, whether it's physical or spiritual. So there's a lot of parallels. And if you've ever been in physical combat, you serve the military, law enforcement, or even combat sports, there's a whole lot of parallels there that I try to bring those into the book to keep it kind of grounded.
I love that you use David and the sling and the stones as also a metaphor that carries us throughout the entire book. But let me start with this, because I think this was also a very striking image in my mind. You talked in the book about the reality is, if we die in a state of mortal sin, we not only go to hell, but we go to hell as slaves. We will be slaves for all eternity to demons. And I've heard stories about this. Certain humans that have ended up in hell can be dragged into exorcisms. They might be presented because they're the slave of demons, so they get kind of used and abused in this way. That is a very striking image. Can you speak to that? This issue of eternal slavery because of the choices that we've made.
Right. It's part of the mystery of salvation and damnation, but the souls that are it is widely accepted by exorcists and those in the field that the souls are the demon that entices a soul to hell is that person now becomes the slave of that demon for eternity. And it's very rare. On rare occasion, you can get a disembodied spirit or a damned soul back in a possession case. It's very rare. I've consulted on cases. I've seen it in real time. But it's Saint Charles Borromeo in the Prenatunda to the 1614 rite of exorcism says if a soul presents himself as a disembodied spirit, ignore it, because the demons will often use that. And I've seen a lot of guys get run down rabbit holes. Hey, this is Aunt Tilly. This is you better off to treat it all the same. But yeah, the fate of the damned soul, it's not pleasant. And working in this apostolate now for the last 9 years has made me appreciate the importance of staying in the state of grace and working on holiness in thought, word, and deed.
In the book, you also describe the devil as a lawyer from hell, which I love that. A lawyer from hell. I love that for more than one reason, by the way, but I won't talk about the second reason. Let's talk about the first one. Why do you describe him? Why do you describe him as a lawyer from hell?
Yeah, I think that's something from Father Ripperger who describes a lawyer, defines a lawyer. A demon as a lawyer from hell. It's because if you understand the way angels, whether glorified or fallen, were created, they were created with a distinct nature and a distinct natural law and a distinct purpose in the mystical body, and they still continue to work that way. Even the fallen angels continue to militate against that for which they were created. So the demon of purity, the spirit of purity, the angels that are to guard purity, to guard holy marriages, to guard virginity, etc., now militate against it in a really radical, evil way. But they're lawyers from hell, and they're bound by the rules that God has established. That's why I use Rogers' rules for Rangers. The U.S. Army Rangers still use this handbook. I've got mine over here. At one time I had to memorize all these rules, the rules for ranging. The very first rule is that every ranger is bound by the precepts and articles of war. And so we have to know the rules of engagement, because this is how the demon is bound. He wants us, though, to try to understand the rules of engagement differently. We're trying to play baseball, and we say four balls, and I get a walk to first base. And they said, no, it takes 6 balls. 3 strikes and you're out. Nope, 2 strikes and you're out. He wants us to not understand the rules of engagement to draw us out of the protection of the authority structure and out of our armament. And so the demon's going to yield or not yield, not according to how good looking we are, whether we were a cav officer or a Marine, whether we got our PhD, whether we're a podcaster. He's going to yield or not yield on three basic premises. Number 1, does this person have the requisite authority of the person in place of the object? Number 2, what is the holiness? What is the state of grace of the person who's asking? You got to have authority before you start driving demons out. We got to make this very clear. In the church today, there's a lot of confusion. But you can have authority. You can be the head of household, and you can have authority in your home. But if you're looking at pornography, and you've done a lot of great work on pornography, if you're stuck in that cycle of pornography and mortal sin, you're not going to drive demons out. In fact, you're opening the door to more into your home. And third, specifically, is what is the person asked? Specificity and prayer is in spiritual combat is very, very critical. When I flew, Cobra helicopters, we had all sorts of cool weapons on these aircraft. You had to use the right weapon, number 1, and you had to hit your target. You can make a lot of noise, but you got to hit your target with specificity. And so too in the spiritual combat. But those rules I flesh out throughout the whole book.
Wow. Just a side note here. I didn't know the Army had Cobras. I thought only Marines flew Cobras. Wow, they let you guys fly them too. Amazing.
Yes,
very nice people,
we had
the Marines.
Actually, we had them first, to be honest with you, but we won't.
Oh, sure.
Get into
sure. Whatever you say, Dr. Schneider, whatever you say.
Hey, I'm a doctor. You can trust me, right?
I'm only teasing.
The Marine Corps have a whiskey model. The Marine has a whiskey model, Cobra, the dual engine, and the Army transitioned into the Apaches right when I was.
Yeah.
When I was
Apaches
are
our baller, as the kids say. There's no question about it.
They are.
But let me go back to authority. Yeah. Let me dive a little deeper on authority, because you said something that I think is very important, is that I think there's a lot of confusion among lay faithful, among even the sort of more charismatic Catholics in our church, in that they can sometimes be misled to think that they have more authority than they actually do, and they can get themselves into some trouble if they break these rules, if they cross these boundaries when they ought not to. Can you speak to that, please?
Right. The authority structure is something established by God, and we work within that structure. We work in a very safe way. Others they collapse they collapse power and authority as one entity, but they're two separate things. Power is the ability to affect change. Authority is the right to command, to make the change. And so it's like a police officer. If I'm driving through you're in Texas, if I'm driving through Texas and a Missouri state police officer pulls me over, I'm going to respond to the bells. I mean, to the cherries and berries. I'm going to respond to that weapon he's got on his side. That's his power, but he has no authority, no jurisdictional authority. So the demon works legalistically within the jurisdictional authority that God has established. This is why we define the demon as the lawyer from hell. And so the demon the demon tracks that. And so there's a twofold end to authority: to provide and to protect. If you stay within the authority structure, you can and should be engaging in spiritual combat, but you do it safely within those twofold ends. What we see in the church today are two extremes, that lay people can do absolutely everything. We don't even need a priest. Just stand in the back and give us your blessing, Father, and we'll do all the work. But then on the other extreme is lay people shouldn't do anything at all. You should just pray the rosary and go to confession. We have to engage the enemy, and we have to do that, but within the structure of our own office. Authority flows not through charism, but through office. We saw this in the first reading of vigils last week. We're reading, if you do the office of readings, for the week we read St. Ambrose on his mystical catechesis, and he says, when you walk up to receive the waters of baptism, do not judge the priest by his appearance, but by office. Think of Elijah and Paul and Peter, and he is calling down fire from heaven through that office. And so we've got to return to that. In the modern church, we've lost this, we've collapsed in the post-Second Vatican Council era. We've collapsed the universal priesthood of the laity into the sacerdotal priesthood of the ordained. Even the council itself, Second Vatican Council, says these differ in essence and degree. And so yes, we are priest, prophet, and king as laity, but there's an essence, a degree and essence, a huge degree and essence difference between us and the ordained. And so what we're trying to do through this book is return the ministry of exorcism and deliverance back into Catholic norms, and returning back to the primary. When Christ sent out the 12, he gave them power and authority, Luke 9:1, to drive out demons. He called the 12 together in Mark chapter 3. He called those whom he wanted to drive out demons with authority. So we have to work on the authority structure. It's very critical.
We're having a conversation with Dr. Dan Schneider, adjunct professor, former Army pilot, combat veteran, and writer of this book here, the Liber Christo Method. Great book. We're going to link to it, but tanbooks.com is the website. We're going to put a link directly to the book on our show notes as well. But when we get back, I want to talk about the flip side of that authority. Those that we just talked about, those that take too much of it. Then there's another side, those that don't take enough of it, like dads, husbands, fathers, the authority they possess, the power to make or break families. Boy, that weight is heavy on our shoulders. We're going to talk to Dr. Schneider about how we might leverage that for the sanctification of our families. It's coming up right after this very quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
This is Franciscan Media's Saint of the Day for July 31st. Today we celebrate St. Ignatius of Loyola. The founder of the Society of Jesus was on his way to military fame and fortune when a cannonball shattered his leg. Because there were no books of romance on hand during his convalescence, Ignatius read a life of Christ and lives of the saints, thus beginning his long, difficult turning to Christ. After reporting a vision of Mary, he made a pilgrimage to her shrine at Montserrat, remaining nearby for almost a year. During this period of conversion, Ignatius began to write down material that later became his greatest work, the Spiritual Exercises. In 1534, at age 43, Ignatius and 6 others vowed to live in poverty and chastity. Ignatius was elected to serve as the first general of the new society. Obedience was to be the prominent virtue, to assure the effectiveness and mobility of his men. All activity was to be guided by a true love of the Church and unconditional obedience to the Holy Father. A true mystic, Ignatius centered his spiritual life on the Trinity, Christ, and the Eucharist. He died in 1556 and was canonized in 1622. There's more about the saints along with inspiration and Catholic resources at our website, saintoftheday.org. From Franciscan Media, this has been Saint of the Day.
It is a scientific fact that life begins at fertilization. Every human being is a human person. It already says in the 14th Amendment of our U.S. Constitution that all persons are to have equal protection under the laws. Yet we have an ongoing mass murder of our little preborn brothers and sisters under the big lie of abortion. The Supreme Court must explicitly affirm federal protection for our last excluded class and end this constitutional crisis. Use your voice and sign the petition now at thestationofthecross.com.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. It's great to be on with you. According to our straw poll over at our YouTube video feed today, we asked the question, should Catholics go see Oppenheimer? 7% say yes, 53% say no, 40% are on the fence. In the after show, maybe we'll talk about how to get you off the fence and get you to commit one way or the other. But we'll talk more about that in the after show, which is when we say goodbye to the radio audience. We stay on the live video feed for another half hour, and we chat directly with you. You get to decide that conversation. You can find everything linked up over at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. But right now, we're talking with Dr. Dan Schneider about this book here, The Liber Christo Method by tanbooks.com. Tanbooks.com. We'll link to it as well in the show notes. A field manual for spiritual combat. If you're a guy, you're going to love this book, okay? It's just going to speak your language. It's like reading your heart. It's like a love letter to you. You know, it's like crawling in the mud under barbed wire fence when they're shooting blanks over your head. It's that kind of goodness. It's the cool stuff that you like most. If you're a lady, I think you're going to get a lot out of this too, but you'll probably be thinking, this would be great for my husband. This would be great for my son. This would be great for my brother or whatever. And I would encourage you to check it out for that as well. Tanbooks.com, tanbooks.com. But before the break, we talked about authority and those that might take too much and get themselves in trouble. There's been cases where people have laid hands on others and trying to pray deliverance prayers and then got themselves possessed in the process. I've had those conversations with exorcists in the past. But then there's the flip side of that. Husbands and fathers, spiritual leaders of their home, like Adam, standing silent next to their bride with the great Nahash, the dragon, the 7-headed dragon, intimidates, threatens, and breathes lies. Okay, well, our job is to be king of our home and to be master over the creatures that try to invade that house. So sometimes men have to fight dragons, and too often men don't. Dr. Schneider, I'd like you to weigh in on that and the power of this book to maybe encourage a man who has not taken that role as spiritual head of his home.
Yeah, I think that's very critical. The temptation on the authority structure. Well, let's go back up. If you work within the authority structure, this is the first and primary rule of engagement. If you step outside of that, the barometer is retaliation, and so we see this in certain charismatic circles where they're being retaliated against. They'll say, "Well, I'm not being retaliated against. I'm doing fine." You have chronic health problems. Your children have left the church. Your grandchildren aren't baptized. Your divorce is your marriage is in shambles. but I'm not being retaliated against. So that's how this is what retaliation looks like. It isn't. This is how it plays out in real time, and so we have to get this straight. And another thing too is that I work in this apostle, but I'm also a scripture scholar, and I teach theology through Franciscan University on their online program. And in the New Testament, the impartation of hands and the Old Testament is done for two things. It's a priestly gesture and a patriarchal gesture. In the New Testament, it's done in blessing. Nowhere in the New Testament do we see laying of hands and driving out demons. This is an importation uncritically accepted through modern Protestantism and Pentecostalism, this impartation of hands and driving out demons. Impartation of hands is one of blessing. So the four prominent priests, exorcists, Monsignor Rossetti, Father Winston Cabalding from the Philippines, Father Ripperger, Monsignor Charles Pope have all publicly said that lay people should not be laying hands and driving demons out on other lay people. We should listen to the voice of these very learned and very experienced priests. And so, but the temptation among the authority structure is to abdicate, not engage, or to usurp. And we see this no more clearly than in the home. The man is the head of household, and it isn't that he's the holiest, that he's the best, the most attractive, that he makes every decision on what, this is the way of engage. He's the first contact of the enemy. He's the first to make contact. This is the way the enemy sees him. I've seen this in session. The priest lays his priestly stole upon the neck, which is the spot that echoes Genesis 3:15 in the Proto-Evangelion, that he will crush and she will crush the head of the serpent, right? And then the priest, and you see a bodily reaction. And then you see a husband in a state of grace laying his hands on his wife. And we see the same bodily reaction as the priest, because those hands have authority. And so learning to pray over and bless his wife and his children. And so people ask me to speak at churches, at conferences and parishes on Ephesians 6, because it's cool. There's a whole lot of cool imagery there. Picture a Marine in today's armor. This is what Paul was looking at, the occupying force of the Romans in Ephesus, and he's describing to them what they were seeing. But before you get into the coolness of Ephesians chapter 6, Paul sets the stage in Ephesians chapter 5. Wives, be subordinate to your husbands, right? And that's a word that we don't like to hear, be subordinate, ordered under. You and I understand this in the military. You had a lot of officers that were not very good Marines, but they outranked you by rank, by office, and they had authority over you. They call you into the office, and you don't say, well, you're out of shape, you're fat. They say, McLean, you get in here, double time, you get in there, because they outrank you. The same thing with me in the Army. And so it's a ranking, to be ordered under, to be ranked under. And so what we ignore, though, is we focus on this word in our highly effeminate and feminized culture and church, and we ignore the rest of the Ephesians 5, where it says, husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church, dying for her, to be crucified for her. And that word upotasso is also, it's a military term that also implies, again, first contact. The man in the home should be taking his wife and his children and pushing them behind him, holding up his shield and making first contact with the enemy. He's the one that should be engaging. He should be leading. He should be saying grace. He should be driving to mass. He should be leading the family in prayers. These small little things make a huge difference in the spiritual realm. And if you're compromised to looking at pornography, and again, you've done some great work on pornography. If you're compromised to pornography, you've taken your shield and laid it aside. You've taken your sword and you put it in the corner, and your family's vulnerable. Because again, the vulnerability of the attack is going to come into that familial construct.
When I was in the Marines, I went to Marine Combat School, and they trained us to, when we were being shot at, to move towards the gunfire, which is kind of counterintuitive. We would scream out, get on line, assault through, get on line, assault through. And you would see muzzle flashes in front of you pointed at you, but you would still assault those positions. And I think today, spiritually, men will be assaulted in some way, temptation, sin, or whatever, and it happens in their home with their kids or their wife or whatever, and they don't get online and they don't assault through. Tell me about the power of sacramentals, about the power of prayer for a man especially to leverage in the spiritual combat.
Right. It's in the Army version of that is no one's coming. It's up to us. That's what we say, because a good NCO knows that when you're pinned down, the first reaction of the soldier or the Marine is going to be, hey, let's just hold up. Someone's going to come save us. We just sit back and someone's going to come save us. The answer is no one's coming. It's up to us, meaning you have to be the first. You have to take the fight to the enemy. We're living in crazy times. We fight an ancient enemy, and the ancient weapons are best. In the Catechism, it says that all of our history, of human history, is one of dour combat with the forces of evil, going back to the very dawn of creation. And so using the ancient weapons to fight the ancient enemy, these little things that we've seen to dismiss in the modern church, sacramentals, holy water, blessed salt, the Epiphany blessing in your home, led by the Father, blessing your children, just laying hands and blessing them, making the sign of the cross and blessing your children, imparting your paternal, patriarchal blessing to your children. The sacraments, of course, the primary way is Father Gabriel Amorth said, one good confession is worth 100 exorcisms, because we take souls from the devil through confession. So being the spiritual leader means bringing your family to confession, to Mass, to receive as much grace, and also ultimately as well a spirituality of sacrifice, learning to offer yourself up and sacrifice your family. Very critical elements of spiritual combat.
This book, The Liber Christo Method, is way more than we discussed today. I mean, way more. We only just the tip of the iceberg. It is a handbook, a spiritual manual for combat, but it also is more than that, I would argue. I would encourage you to check it out. I'm excited to dive deeper into this book, tanbooks.com. We're going to put a link to it. Dr. Dan Schneider, thank you for your time today. I'd love to have you back and follow up on this conversation.
Let's do it. I'd love to have it, Joe. It'd be great.
All right, praise be to God.
Getting together. I love it.
Semper Fi. All right, tanbooks.com. Check that out. We'll put them in the show notes in the after show. I want to talk to you about this, the Oppenheimer, Barbie, anything you want. It's on the table for discussion. We'll see you there. God love you. So what did you think of today's show? Let's discuss that right now in the after show. Your take on the after take. Comment, interact live with me and the team. All you need to do is search for one of our live video feeds on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, LinkedIn, and elsewhere. Simply search for the Station of the Cross, Joe McClain, or A Catholic Take. I'm looking forward to seeing you and interacting with you directly. It all starts right now. It's the after show.
And we are clear. Welcome to the after show, everyone. Happy Monday.
Yes, praise be to God. We are we're down to, let's see here. Should Catholics see Oppenheimer? 6% say yes. 59% say no. 35% are still on the fence. Let us know where you're at with that. The straw poll is sitting up over at look at that. Halfway. This reminds me of like an 80s school picture.
This looks like Earth, Wind, and Fire going on or something.
Yeah, it's like it doesn't look like one of those 80s where you would have the double take. Like
or that too. Yeah, I was thinking like Earth, Wind, and Fire music video or something. But yeah, this definitely one of those old pictures. Those are amazing.
Yeah, buddy. I lived there.
That's what our staff photos on the website should look like. That would be great.
That would be hilarious. That would be very, very funny. For sure. Oh, let's see here. Can I just say good morning to you, T-Storm. Pray for T-Storm's intentions today. She's got some intentions that we would love for you to pray for. Really appreciate the community we have on the back end on Telegram. You guys are amazing. Sharon is over there. Good morning to you, Sharon. Liz, good morning to you. Yvonne, Mike K, good morning. Mike's on, are you on vacation, right, Mike? You're in Connecticut right now? I saw you posted some cool pictures earlier about a church. Eileen, good morning to you. Praying for you as well. Thanks for hanging out with us. Damon, good morning to you. Anna, good morning to you. Praise be to God. Glad to see you guys here. Thanks for being on the team. By the way, pray for Jim Caviezel. Apparently he is in the hospital, according to a video posted by Eduardo Boraschi. We don't know exactly why. He never said. Just that he had to go to the hospital in sort of an emergency situation. Please keep him in your prayers. Which reminds me, there is a family that we are connected to here through homeschooling whose little boy has been on a heart transplant list for some time. His heart is in failure. He is receiving a heart transplant this week. If you could pray for the loss of the child in the family that's donating the heart, And if you could pray for this little boy, hopefully to have a successful surgery and to accept the heart, because it's not a guarantee, right? It's been a really rough road for that family over the course of the last couple of years. So keep them all in your prayers today. Andrea Lamort, good morning to you. Good morning. So where do you guys stand? Where are we at right now? We're at 50 down. Whoa, it's been changing. 5% say yes, 53% say no. 42% are now on the fence, fence sitters. What would it take to get you to say, I won't go see this movie? Let me know. Let me know your thoughts. I want to know what you have to think about that. Let me know. Hey, Cherokee Woman 20, top of the morning to you. Thanks for being on the team today over on Rumble. Glad to see you here. Appreciate it. Kellyanne says, I wish both you men were speakers of the men's conference in Rochester, New York. Men need to hear all of this and be taught how to be spiritual authority of their homes. We'd love to come. You got to put in a good word for us. I would love to come someday. I've spoken at many men's conferences. I don't get that many opportunities anymore, but used to be. I used to get a lot of opportunities to speak at men's conferences. Now, maybe one a year. It used to be several a year. Now it's like one a year. I will be speaking at the Tyler, Texas men's conference in October with Bishop Strickland. Very much looking forward to that. That's exciting. I just sent an email on Friday where I shared my sort of itinerary of travel dates. I'm going to be traveling kind of a lot this fall. Later, this last part of the summer and early fall. I'll be in Detroit. I'll be in Buffalo, New York. I'll be in Birmingham, Alabama. I'll be in San Antonio, Texas, Tyler, Texas, and it looks like I'm going to be going to Rome as well. At least that's the plan. And Andrea, thank you for connecting me to somebody who can help me make sure my Rome trip is maximized. I was thinking about Rome because I'm planning to go to the Rome Forum with LifeSide News. Just as an attendee, I'm hoping while I'm there to interview Cardinal Mueller at a minimum, I would say, is my goal. But John Henry Weston, Bishop Athanasius Schneider, and some others I hope to interview. But I'm trying to figure out who do I know that knows some folks to see what we might be able to maximize while we're there. One idea was Alexander Trugoel may come, and I wonder if I might be able to interview Alexander, but on the bridge that he threw the Pachamamas off of into the Tiber. Like, interview him there at that spot. That would be cool, wouldn't it? That'd be nice. That'd be a fun deal to do. So I'm thinking about doing that. I'm also thinking about potentially hiring a tour guide for a day so that I could film. I'm thinking about filming in a couple of spots, and a tour guide would be perfect, not only for the details and the backstories, but more importantly, like the ins and outs of how to get to these places, film well there, and times and all of those things. But I'm thinking about, maybe producing a short documentary on the martyrdom of Peter and Paul, and then providing that to our insiders and our donors over at the Station of the Cross as like an extra bonus, premium content. I'm thinking about doing that. So if you have ideas, leave them in the comments. Let me know what you think. T-Storm says, regarding Oppenheimer, even if they removed the nudity, it seemed as if they were minimizing or romanticizing his communist ties. So I brought up at the beginning of the radio show that my wife and I had a chance to have a date night, and we watched Bakita over on formed.org. Bakita is an incredible story. Saint Bakita, she was born and raised in Africa. She was kidnapped and put into slavery in Africa. She was abused quite a bit, actually. Whipped, abused sexually and otherwise. An Italian businessman in Africa ended up buying her and bringing her back to Italy. And although she lived better in his home, she was still pretty much considered just a servant. And this Italian family bought a hotel in Africa, and they were going back to Africa to manage the hotel. And
and they were going to take her with them, and she didn't want to go. By that time, she had been placed in a convent hey, you stay here. We're going to go check things out. We'll be back to get you. So while she's in the convent, she grows to love. She ultimately gets baptized, becomes a Christian. She has this call to a vocation, and when they come back to get her, she doesn't want to go. So she had to go to court in Italy to fight for her freedom, and she's victorious. So she wins her case, and she's able to pursue her vocation as a religious, and she joins this community and professed vows. And this movie depicts all of that. It's interesting as I'm watching this film, it's in Italian with English subtitles, and I don't mind. It's fine. I don't have that much of a problem watching foreign films in that regard. And I keep noticing like the actors, and I'm thinking, I know I've seen these people before. I just like the main male actor. I'm like the whole time I'm thinking, I know I've seen this guy before. Where have I seen it? And then it dawns on me. He is the centurion in the Passion of the Christ. I'm like, oh, that's the guy. Oh, wow. That's the dude in the Passion of the Christ. So he plays an excellent jerk in this film. 100% total jerk. Really meanie. But he does a good job at it anyway. A rich jerk. And then the actress, like sort of not the main actress who plays Paquita, but one of the supporting actresses, I recognize her, but I can't place her yet. I still have to look her up. But anyway, I highly recommend Paquita because it is good storytelling. It is difficult topic, hard topic, good storytelling. Similar to The Sound of Freedom, right? One of the things about Sound of Freedom that I found fascinating was it was a requirement. In fact, I was listening to Tim Ballard in an interview talk about this on his own podcast. So the child actors in the film were never told what the movie was about. They had to act and portray emotions and situations without knowing the circumstances. They could never know is what was required. But also, Tim Ballard said to Alejandro Monteverde, the director of the film, he said, listen, you cannot depict anything in this film that would give these perverts some joy and satisfaction and pleasure, because they'll come to watch your film and they cannot be enticed or tempted or have any titillating feeling, nothing. You cannot depict that, which required the filmmakers to dig deep and figure out ways to tell stories, to communicate concepts and ideas in ways that aren't graphic. It's good old-fashioned storytelling. So let's take it back to Oppenheimer now. So if you have a character like Oppenheimer who has communist sympathies, a pervert, can you not depict those in ways that don't get graphic? This is the point that I think I was trying to make, and that Gabriel Castillo is making and Eric Sammons is making. But if you guys have an alternative opinion, I'd like to know it. You can leave it in the com box. But I think there's ways they did not need to be graphic. Similar, I believe, to what was that movie with Mark Wahlberg? Father, what was it, Jake? Father Stew.
Yeah.
It's like the film Father Stew, where he uses all these F-bombs and all this language. And Catholics like myself complained, and the people who promoted the movie complained about Catholics like myself who were complaining. Like, oh, it's just he's being real. Okay, well, have fun. I don't want to sit and listen to F-bomb after F-bomb after F-bomb come out of Mark Wahlberg's mouth, which is pretty much every Mark Wahlberg movie. So I just don't. So that's why Sony came out with an edited version, making it more palatable, right? Because if you want more people to come see it, make it so that more people can come see it. If you only want a super niche audience, then I guess make it so that only people who don't care about the language issue or the sex issue or whatever issue, violence issue, then I guess that's where you're at. I mean, I guarantee people are going to come see it, just not as many as if you had made it more accessible. Which brings me to the other issue. Like I pointed out the movie reviews. Plugged In. I don't know if you guys use pluggedin.com. My wife loves pluggedin.com. She's always looking at pluggedin.com for reviews. And you can see where they will show you just, how bad things are and what you need to pay attention to. They have all of this. They go specifically into these subcategories to give you, and it's unfortunate. This is not Catholic. It ought to be. It ought to be. It used to be. The Catholic bishops used to provide movie reviews. Not anymore. How sad is that? This is now focused on the family. So thank you, Focus on the Family, for giving parents tools to better understand what we should. But I have to use this stuff. Like, my own spidey senses are at play here. If I sense that a movie is going to cram something in my face and my mind that I don't want there, I'm not going to go watch it. Which is why part of the reason why I was nervous about watching Sound of Freedom. I at first thought, man, it's going to be hard. I don't know that I want to watch something and have that image in my mind. But they made that film so that I didn't have to worry about that. They made that film so that I could watch it, and it would make me feel uncomfortable because of the subject matter, but they wouldn't depict anything that would have you struggling with that. Praise be to God, right? And as part of the film Sound of Freedom is Tim Ballard, and in real life, when Tim Ballard was an agent of the Department of Homeland Security, and he was hunting these perverts, he had to watch their porn films to document the evidence and write reports on what they were about so they can be submitted in the investigation. Could you imagine that was your job? Can you even imagine what your life would be like, how messed up your mind would be? Your emotions, your psychology, it would be messed up. It'd be broken. Similarly, we saw news articles a couple years ago about the fact checkers that Facebook would hire. There was a firm out of Cambridge, Massachusetts, and they had a whistleblower there who basically came out and he revealed like what was life like there. And he would talk about there was the normal fact checkers. Like, hey, you can't be questioning, the backs or whatever, or Hunter Biden, you can't be questioning that stuff. There was that stuff. But no, he belonged to a unit that was even more insane. The unit that he belonged to, the department he belonged to, their job was to find the really gross, disgusting stuff. Pornography, death porn, revenge porn, gross, disgusting, perverted bestiality nonsense of the devil. And they had to go looking for this stuff and then tag it or whatever. So he had to witness this stuff all the time. He said there would be the bizarrest of behaviors. People would defecate in the sinks in the bathroom and just because they were so messed up by this stuff. Bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. And so Hollywood films, it's like we interrupt this plot to bring you violence, language, sex. Now, back to the story. It's totally unneeded. It's totally unneeded. You can communicate these types of things in gratuitous ways and be better at storytelling, but they don't do it, do they? Don Franco is on the team today. Welcome to the team, Don Franco. So watched the film Joseph over the weekend, starring Ben Kingsley. It was wonderful, wholesome, and inspiring. Is that the Joseph of Many Colors film? The Coat of Many Colors? Is it that one? I think that's the one. I think I've seen that, but it's been a long time. Len Pine is on the team today. Says, good morning, great show and after show today. I have relied on Plugged In for many years since my kids were very little. What about VidAngel? You know how, guys, I feel about the Mormons dominating this stuff, but nonetheless, I give money to VidAngel. Hard-earned money. Very limited resource in our family, to be sure. I give some to VidAngel every single month. You know why I do it? So that I can have a chance, because there's a lot of films on there that they're still not films I would show my kids, but if I want to watch them, I will only watch them with VidAngel because I can filter out the language, blasphemy, sexual references, violence even, graphic elements, filter them out. Then I get plot, character development. I can live with it. I would never have watched Jack Ryan on Amazon unless I had VidAngel. I would never have watched, what's the other guy? Chris Pratt and The Terminal List, which is, it's so venge porn. Like, it's venge porn, The Terminal List. It's just vengeance porn. That's all it is. My spidey senses will say, you just can't do that one. So you'll watch it on VidAngel, and then you'll be like, oh, I really can't do this one. Like, good grief. But with that, I mean, it should be if you vote me in as supreme ruler of all the universe, I promise you, I will force the movie industry to allow us to filter all their product. Okay, so that's one of my party platforms as supreme ruler of the universe, is I will force Hollywood to allow us as parents to filter their product, and they can't say anything about it. We get to decide what we do and do not get to watch. Not them, but us. So, by the way, speaking of which, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this publicly, so I'm not going to tell you who, but I got a text last night from a friend who the last couple of years has been in the headline news in a significant way because FBI agents raided something. Maybe running for Congress. That's all I'm going to say. Not allowed to say anything else. Anyway. Hey, Alberto. Good morning to you. And welcome to the team. Glad to see you here. Praise be to God. KP Jack 06 had to stop my 15-year-old from going with his friend this week. Oof. How'd that go? Andrea Lamort said, saw that movie on EWTN. What a story. I agree. It was a good story, and the lady who played Bakita did such a great job. She did such a great job. Liz Finch, you are on the team today, and I appreciate it. Says, Joe, all some of us need is the ability to change our vote in the poll. Are you not allowed to change the vote once you cast it? I don't actually know. I don't actually know. But you can leave your vote in the chat box too. KP Jack 06 says, good morning, Joe. No on the movie. I agree. Kilroy Jones is here. Good morning to you. Yvonne is here. Good morning to you. Let's see, where are we at here? We're at 10% say yes to Oppenheimer, 52% say no, 38% say unsure, it depends. If you are an unsure or a depend, please put in the comments why. What is it that you are unsure of, or what is it that it depends upon? What would need to happen for you to either go or not go to this film? By the way, Barbie is a topic we're going to cover with Dr. Carrie Gress on Wednesday. I'm very grateful to get her back on the show. This, in fact, can I just say, we're getting a 2-for special this week. We're getting a 3. It's a triumvirate this is a triumvirate week. Triumvirate week on A Catholic Take. Jake, we need some promotions. Can you do a triumvirate week promotion?
I think so.
Tomorrow, David L. Gray is back on the show. That guy hasn't been on since his attorney sent me a cease and desist order, which I promptly ignored. I'm teasing. His attorney didn't send that. I'm just teasing. Just teasing. Carrie Gress is back on the show. She has not been on a long time because this hour of the day is really hard for her with getting kids off to school. Dr. Paul Kengor is back on the show. Also, this hour is hard for him. So for all three of them, it's been a difficulty getting them back onto the show because of the time of day the show is on. So it's going to be a great week. David O'Gray tomorrow, Carrie Gress Wednesday, Dr. Paul Kengor is on Thursday, and Matt Gaspers is on Friday to talk about World Youth Day. So it's going to be a full lineup. Kengor's got a brand new book out about slavery, in fact. The Catholic Church on Slavery, The Worst of Indignities is his brand new book. We're going to be talking about that. So, small world. Talked about a Bakita a minute ago. Now we're going to talk about Dr. Paul Kengor's book coming up later this week. So I'm very excited. But Dr. Carrie Gress has an article, a review of Barbie on the Daily Wire, and we're going to talk about Barbie on Wednesday. But you got Snow White is coming up, and they're revamping Snow White. Snow White doesn't need no man. She don't need no man. Don't need no kiss. No man. Are you kidding me? Please.
And then, of course, the mermaid film. How many people watched the mermaid film? Not me. If you did, let me know. I'd like to know. 9% down to yeses or 9%. 55% say no. 36% say unsure. Sharon says, Kilroy, it is sometimes hard to protect some from themselves. T-Storm says, my unsure is also now a no. Kilroy Jones says, ban Hollywood. Liz says, my unsure is a no. I hadn't heard the details when I voted. KP Jack 06 says, luckily it went well. Yes. Jake, what do you say? Oppenheimer.
I mean, I wasn't interested in seeing it anyway, but yeah, the answer is
you
no.
weren't?
I wasn't that. You? No, I was like,
if it didn't have sex in it or anything vulgar, what then?
No, I was
still no.
And I enjoy.
Don't you have a history degree?
Yeah, I'm not interested in sanitized Hollywood history of Oppenheimer. It's like, no, I'm not interested in this. If I knew they were going to actually tell an accurate historical story, I'd be interested. But
are you saying this wasn't historical? Are you suggesting this wasn't accurate? You're saying it's not a documentary,
something like that. Yeah, I had no interest in.
Perhaps you were
the
unaware.
Sanitized account of how they blew up, Japanese Catholics
Millions.
in Nagasaki.
How many people
how our
died?
Freemasonic president ordered the incineration of multiple Japanese
Catholics. I see it
Catholics.
both ways, though. I do see it both ways. Can I just so I think this is a good conversation. So when I went to boot camp, I joined the Marine Corps at 17. I joined for the same reason that Dr. Schneider went to become a Cobra pilot for the first Gulf War. When I went to boot camp, I remember they showed us a video at boot camp, a World War II footage. And I had seen a lot of World War II footage by that point in my life. I mean, I watched every Hollywood film, Vietnam era movie. I memorized Full Metal Jacket. That was like all that stuff. Heartbreak Ridge. Are you kidding me? Oh man, so good. But when I watched this World War II footage that they showed us, especially of Iwo Jima, of the body parts, I thought, oh, I never seen that. I could never seen parts of humans. And that was like striking. And it was black and white footage, but it was like, it left a mark in my mind. I can see it. I remember sitting in that classroom vividly right now, watching that footage thinking, wow, that's real. And I remember thinking, especially when we would do hand-to-hand combat training. So we were doing these drills. We would be in a giant pit, and there'd be these platforms, and the DIs would pace back and forth on top of these platforms. And as we were choking out, our fellow recruit, flipping them and choking them and trying to break their necks and all that other stuff, the drill instructor would just pace back and forth, and he would quote statistics from Vietnam. Would say in Vietnam, every single Marine in a Marine fire base in a forward operating position would be responsible to kill 15 North Vietnamese Army regulars. If you died, you'd leave your buddy to have to kill 30. I mean, that just they would spout this stuff, and you'd be like, this is real. This isn't some childhood, this isn't Sergeant York we're talking about here. This isn't Audie Murphy we're talking about here. This is real. They're preparing us to kill other human beings and potentially die as a result. It's like, and then they would tell you the statistics of combat in the Pacific campaign in relation to Iwo Jima and other island campaigns. And then they would show you the footage of how resilient the Japanese soldiers were and how they would fight to the death. They would not fight to surrender. Ever. It was rare. It was rare to get a surrender. You were fighting to the death. It was so hard to fight. And many, many thousands died. Horrible deaths as a result. And then they showed you footage of the citizens of Okinawa when the Americans were coming, the citizens were throwing themselves off the cliffs to die of suicide rather than to be taken by the Americans. And then you go, well, if we invade Japan, as much as 1 million people could die.
So I see that argument and say, okay, one bomb might convince them to surrender, right? Now, the flip side of that argument is we could have easily surrounded and blockaded their island. By that point, we had command and control. We had pushed them all the way back to Japan. We could have blockaded their island. We could have applied other pressures to them that might have eventually worn them down and saved more lives. I think there were other options on the table we could have pursued and didn't. I think they were pretty quick to drop a bomb. That doesn't mean I'm totally saying that they shouldn't have dropped the bomb. Saying they're I think the reality is there was a lot of people that were like, yeah, if we try to invade, if we try to land on Japan, it's going to be really bad. Really bad. So no easy answers, I guess my point.
Well, to me, it seems pretty easy is the chance guarantee wiping out a city of civilians or possibly many civilians die? To me, that's a no-brainer choice. But
the possibility, at least?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like either guarantee, let's slaughter a bunch of civilians, or possibly, maybe.
It's like,
or let's look at another option. That's the choice where it's
the Japanese were incredibly resolved.
They were
resolved.
There's no doubt about that. There were, I mean, the some of the accounts of Iwo Jima and Okinawa and the holdouts.
Here's the other thing too: is given how anti-Catholic Japan was. I mean, Nagasaki was the Christian center, still is in many ways the Christian center of Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they dropped the bombs the second time. But how many died in an instant, not prepared, not reconciled to God?
Mm-hmm.
And now we'll spend eternity burning in hell because they worshipped pagans, because they were pagans and worshipped false gods and rejected Christianity. Rejected God. I know what you're saying. But God judges on a sliding scale. I do agree with that. If you are saved through the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, the sacrament of salvation on planet Earth. There's no other way around that. But, I mean, do you have invincible ignorance? It's not for me to decide. I'm not the judge. God's the judge. And I imagine some will have invincible ignorance, but some won't. Maybe many won't, as Jesus seems to indicate that the road to hell is wide and well-trodden. And the path to heaven, road versus path, is hidden, and very few find it. We just sent a lot of people to hell. And I think that's part of the issue, isn't it? We live in a country where the issue of salvation is not of preeminence. Geopolitical goals are the preeminence, which is another reason why I, as someone who had served in our military, don't recommend to parents to let their kids go off to serve right away. Just hardcore facts. It just is what it is. You want to become an indentured servant in many ways. You're relinquishing certain freedoms. You are signing a contract to the federal government to let them leverage you however they see fit, the powers that be. And what's been different between Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, Bush Sr., Bush Jr., Barack Obama? In foreign policy, it didn't matter. Democrat, Republican, we still have a messed up foreign policy, which is something I pay attention to with these candidates. What is their foreign policy? Oh, we got to give more billions. More billions. Got to go to Ukraine. I don't know. Not seeing it, guys. It's just my opinion. You let me know what you think. All right, we're down to 9% say yes, 57% say no, 35% still are unsure whether or not they want to go see Oppenheimer. Well, let me know. Let me know. What do you think? I'd like to know. Maybe you get a last chance here to let me know what you're unsure about. One of my mom's neighbor's husband died in a Japanese camp, Alberto says. Wow. Pray for the repose of their soul. Army Basic Training 1998. They showed us Saving Private Ryan. Did they show you Saving Private Ryan, KB Jack 06? Wow. That would have been fun. I'm surprised they didn't show us Full Metal Jacket.
or Gunny Highway. That would have been pretty awesome. I lived in those Quonset huts that Gunny Highway had in that movie, Heartbreak Ridge. So good. Anyway, God bless you. God love you. We'll see you guys back here tomorrow morning with David L. Gray.